in my oh,
Sorry to interrupt. You just got to click got it.
okay.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Got it. Yes. Okay, so I'm being recorded?
Yes.
Okay. So my approach was always, what else do I need to know and what else can I know? And always go after knowledge. And that's my guideline. And the natural curiosity, very strong 9,000 in my chart, all combined. And again, I try to not leave a stone unturned. Just learn anything and everything. And it takes a while, years and years, to integrate all this knowledge. So by now, I think that it's all information in my head is already integrated, but it took years to do that. And that's what I tell my students. The patience will get you there. Anyway, we need to do today. Okay. I guess I have a website. It's over there, bearstar.com, and I have this email. If you lose it, call Danny, contact Danny. He has my contact. You can write to me, and now let me start.
Just bear with me. The microphone has just.
Not recording it?
It's the microphone just switched, so I just need to press the button again. Sometimes it does this.
Touching. Okay. Question. Is 9 o'clock a dead stop? Or...
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Just bear with me. Sorry, we're just. What's going on?
How much the chat?
Can you just let people in the chat know?
Something not connected. Right?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, so tonight's topic is a huge topic. It covers a lot of ground. And everything that I will say, every point that I will make by itself can serve a whole lecture and a whole research by itself. But my goal is to take you to a sweeping view of the whole issue as I see it. In terms of hold your questions to the end, because it's not an astrology it's not a teaching class. So just hold your questions for the end and then we'll take the questions. So now I'm going to start. Am I good, Danny?
Yeah. I'm just being a perfectionist with your view.
Okay, one second. I need to turn up volume. No. Okay.
Okay, I'll fix that.
Good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yes. Okay.
Before I start, what you will see on the screen is a lot of text and a lot of notes. These are my notes for myself. Don't try to read it. You can pay attention to highlights, to things in color, but I will deliver the information. So don't be frustrated if you're not reading every word there. Plus, there will be a recording, and if you want to read the details of the text, you'll be able to do that. So this is my technical introduction. Astrology and faith. Faith versus free will is what I call the elephant in the room when it comes to astrology. It is encountered from day one. Day one in astrology, when we encounter astrology, we realize that the map of the heavens at the moment of birth is a map for life. I call it life DNA. Everybody goes through that. Astrology is deterministic by definition from birth. We say that as above, so below. By definition, it's deterministic because astrology manifests like a big clockwork in the sky, as above, so below. Above is like a big clockwork, the cosmic order and the solar system. It's a big clockwork. Astrology is also predictive by nature. It has predictive power. And the fact that astrology can predict makes the question of fate versus free will even more acute. And not only do we predict, but I say that we don't predict in a vague kind of way. We predict with precision. We calculate things. So I'm saying that astrology, by virtue of the ability to predict, makes astrology very concrete. It quantifies astrology. It can be measured. I'm saying fate can be measured through the predictive work. And then you begin to wonder, so who is in control? And can it be changed? Everybody goes through this question, can I change it? And then your clients ask the same question, and you have to have an answer in some way. You cannot leave it unanswered. Can I change it? Or can it be changed? Therefore, I'm saying that astrology makes you a philosopher instantaneously, immediately. From day one, you become a philosopher. So to me, astrology is philosophy, not psychology, not some humanistic thing. It's philosophy. It tackles the most important question that philosophy brings up. So we are philosophers. And the need to resolve these questions becomes urgent. It's urgent for yourself, but like I said, it's also urgent if you read for other people, because you will be asked these questions. So you need to have some kind of an answer. Also, predeterminism. On my screen, it's red. Here on the screen, it's kind of brownish. So if you want to follow, you can more or less follow. So I'm saying that predeterminism runs against the belief system that we grow up on in Western society. We're told that our future is up to us. You make your future. I call it input-output. What you put in, you get out. And in computer language, where we used to say garbage in, garbage out. But here we say, you put in the good work, you get good results. That's the philosophy we grow up on. We're told from early on, that's what you need to do in life. So when things turn out right in life, people take credit for it. They say, oh, I did it. Thanks to my talent, my work. People always take credit for good results. But when the results are bad, people blame others, or they say, oh, it's bad luck. Nobody takes credit for bad results, only for good results. But it's always assumed that it's what you do determines the outcome. Also, the immediate subjective perception of the self. So when you say I, or when you say I did this or I did that, I'm saying that the immediate subjective perception of the self is that our actions originate from our own will, from our own mind. I think about something, I do it. So I created it. We always assume that the idea or the thought to do something, the motivation to do something starts here from the mind. That's the usual, that's the norm. And we are also told by all the therapists and the psychologists, or anyone else, or teachers, we're told that you can change your mind. You can change your thoughts, and by changing your mind, you'll create different future for yourself. So it's all the onus is on us. This whole responsibility is on us. It's up to us. That's how we grow up in Western society, in Western culture. The question of fate and free will began with ancient Greek philosopher. That's where it started. It just becomes very obvious. And it continued into the monotheistic religions that followed: Judaism, Christianity, and eventually Islam. There's always one God, and it's a monotheistic religion. And it's also present in our time. The fact that when we don't live a religious life does not mean that the question is not there. It's just there in a different way. And the questions boil down to simply, is it all fate, or are we completely free? Is it a combination? Is it conditional? If there is free will, is it conditional? If free will is conditional, then based on what? What's the condition? And also, how is it decided, or who or what is the decider? These are the typical questions that the whole topic summarizes into. Opposition to astrology and its deterministic or fatalistic implication came to a head in the 12th century in a Jewish community. So I will come to that later, but I'm saying that it's a journey from way, way back all the way to that 12th century in like a crisis point, which I will describe to you later. So let's see how we get there. I'm going to start with some just highlights from Greek philosophy. And when I say Greek philosophy, I'm referring to the pre-Socratic philosophers, then Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and then Neoplatonism. All these are like a chain of classical philosophers. So why do we need to talk about it? Because whatever they came up with is still with us. Whether you know it or not, it's in our politics, in our social values, in our personal values. It all started then in the writings of those people, which is pretty amazing. Personally, I'm always fascinated with the pre-Socratic philosophy, and much of it shows up in astrology when you walk away from the chart as a psychological picture and you think about the meaning of astrology. You can see even the old layers, ancient layers of Greek philosophy inside the chart. Even the question of elements, the four elements, you can take it all the way back to ancient Greek philosophy. So there's a lot that we live with that you might not be aware of, and it all goes back to that. And all of them, one way or another, all of them brought up the issue of fate or free will, even if they didn't call it that way, but they described it, the mechanism. It's all there. So I'm going to keep going, and just to sample, I'm going to sample the obvious one. And the obvious one, we start with the Greek mythology and the Moira. I said to Danny earlier, people who cannot pronounce my name, I tell them, call me Moira, because I like that. I'm one of the Moiras. I tell people's fate. As an astrologer, that's what you do. You tell people their fate. So I'm a Moira. That's my private job. Okay. I also call these Moiras, the Moiras are the three mythological goddesses of fate. And I call them the executors, the executors of fate. They execute it. They don't decide it, but they execute it. And they were very famous. And you see that picture was also on the website, on the Meetup website, that picture of the three goddesses. And what they do is they spin the thread of life. One spin the thread of life. The other one measures the length. And the third one cuts the cord, end of journey. So these are the three fates, or the three Moiras. Now, it's interesting that these Moiras were above the gods. They were primordial from the start, and nobody could challenge them. They were independent, and you cannot appeal to them. You cannot appeal to the god. Their judgment was final. They were above the gods in Greek and mythological stories. And they carry out the judgment, and the judgment is decided by necessity. The word necessity is also known as ananke. We'll come to her later. So necessity comes up with the judgment, and they carry it out. All this implies fate. All this implies there's a story. That's it. It comes to an end, and that's it. The word Moirai, the word itself is very interesting for me, and you see it here. The word Moira, it's the Greek word, because the root of it and the meaning of it means lot. Danny, do you have a ruler or something I can point, or something like a stick? I didn't think about it. I'm so out of practice with conferences in person. Okay, I'll manage.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, I'll manage. Okay. So you can see the words here. The words are lot or portion or degree or fate and doom, but these are the critical words, lot and portion. Why? Because these come into astrology directly. And they come into astrology through what we call the lot of fortune. If some of you don't know what it is, come to my classes or find out. The lot of fortune is not a planet, it's a factor. It's a calculated factor in the chart. and it's gold. It's a fantastic tool in astrology. Most people don't know it because it appears only in classical astrology. It's a whole lecture. I'm not getting into this lecture now, but it's so important. It's one of my major tools in predictive work. So you know how important it is, in my opinion. So you see that the word lot is lot and fortune. And that's what's interesting here, that the lot that the Moiras or the goddess of fate dictate is included in the astrological chart directly. It's a direct link into astrology. These words, lot and fortune. And I suppose. Yes. Okay. Now we come to Plato. Plato is a philosopher. The Moiras were mythological. And you know, most of the mythological information that we have comes from Homer and the Iliad and so on. So those were the sources. But now we have Plato. And Plato discusses fate in what's known as the legend or the myth of Ur. Title over there, the myth of Ur, appears in his book, The Republic. And Plato's description of fate is determined prior to birth. The whole story is before birth. That's where fate is decided. There's no astrological chart here. There's just a chain of events. Not about astrology. So according to that myth of Ur, and the myth of Ur is a soldier who died in battle. He went to heaven, but he didn't really die. They kept him there for 10 days. They put him on the side. They showed him what happens to the souls before incarnation, before they get born back into the world. So he comes back from the other world and tells the story. And I'm summarizing here what he tells, what he sees. So it's basically a story of morality, a morality story, to tell people that they should do the right thing in life so that when they incarnate the next time, they will not get into a punishment again. This is the famous karma. Now, for Plato, souls are immortal and cyclical. Plato, so the soul is immortal and goes through cyclical incarnation. And this goes back to another Greek philosopher, Pythagoras, and also to maybe from India, from the Far East. But here in Plato, we have the soul getting ready to incarnate into the world. So the stages that the soul goes through are very interesting. And they're listed here. The soul, so first these souls have to stand in line and wait for their turn, and they wait for their turn to choose the next life. So they stand in line, but the place in line is based on a lottery, meaning there's a lottery, and that lottery depends what place in life they'll get, what place in that line. So in other words, it introduces the element of chance, of randomness. Lottery is chance and randomness. So half of the story is the lottery. So you don't know where your place in line will be. That's chance and the lottery. So the soul stand in that line finally, and then they choose they choose. So now we have the choice, the act of choice, but this by the soul. Not by you after birth, by the soul. So the soul chooses the next incarnation, and then a guardian spirit is assigned to it, like a guardian angel to accompany it throughout life. And then the last step is to go through necessity. Necessity is that goddess, and I have more information about necessity here. So, and then once the soul is primed into all that, past all these stages, it's ready to incarnate. Before that moment, the soul is made to forget everything that it saw. So it's born as an innocent baby, forget all those steps that it went through. I have to tell you that when I read that, I remembered a similar, not anecdote, but similar story in the Jewish tradition. So it's a well-known tradition. That I read it. I knew about it many years ago, even before I saw it in Plato. So it's interesting, the act of forgetting what you know. You come out fresh and you have to start from scratch as a baby. So we have the two elements, lottery, which is chance, but then ananke, or necessity, tells you exactly what you're going to do, and you choose what you're going to do. The story is more elaborate than that, but like I said at the beginning, whatever I'm going to say tonight every point I'm going to make can be elaborated in the whole lecture. So I'm not going to do it. I'm just picking the highlights that relate to fate and what I call the mechanism of fate. So a word about necessity. Necessity is another name for Ananke. Ananke is another goddess. And this Ananke, the meaning of Ananke is in parentheses, constraint, what must be, the inevitable. It's interesting that Ananke is the sister of Kronos. And Kronos, the god Kronos, is what we call Saturn in astrology. It's just that's the god the name that we use in astrology. So Ananke represents what we would call Saturnian effect in our lives, what has to be. And even with little experience in astrology, you know how strong Saturn is in the chart. I always say to my students, Saturn is the strongest planet in the chart. Nothing is stronger, no planet is stronger than Saturn. Saturn has finality, it has the last word, and Saturn is so strong it doesn't budge. It doesn't care. This is the rule. This is the cosmic rule. You cannot go past it. You cannot change it. That's what it is. So this is Saturn in the chart, but it's also through Ananke. The symbolism, Ananke includes that. It's interesting that Ananke is also described as the mother of the Moira. So now we have a whole lineage there. We have the Ananke that decides what's going on. Those three sisters make it happen. They cut the thread. And it's also interesting that Ananke is described as holding a spindle, and you see the image there. And the spindle is the spindle of the cosmic spheres. So again, we have connection with nature, with the cosmic order, with nature. It's not random. It's all described in nature. Everything is in its own place. It circles, everything is organized. There's law, there's order. It's all there. And so this is the Plato. Now we go to, so I think that in terms of Plato, that's the most obvious place where fate is mentioned as such. And again, it's determined before birth by the soul. Half of it is random, half of it is choice. And the story has more nuances, but this is the center of it. So now we move to Aristotle, and now we have something slightly different. Again, to me, related to fate. Aristotle was a student of Plato, so this is like historical sequence here. So Aristotle has the doctrine of the four causes. And I say that these four causes have fate built in. By definition, it's based on fate. I have it up there. So what are these four causes? Everything that comes into being, into material world, into life, into the world, everything that comes into being is the result of four causes. So what are these? One is material, listed here. Material cause, formal cause, efficient cause, final cause. I remember when I first encountered it, I said, what's that? What's the difference? And it took me a little while to read it again and again to really understand the depth of that. And a lot of it has to do with Plato. Everything they build on top of each other. It's a continuation, but I cannot take the time. So I'll do Aristotle without Plato. So material cause, the substance, the matter that you need to make something from: wood, glass, clay, material, something physical. But it's not just material matter, but it can even be, I wrote, movement. According to Greek philosophy, especially in Aristotle, motion, the thing that created in the world through motion, just motion is an act of creation. It's a whole topic by itself. So all these are material cause, the subject matter, the matter itself. That is followed by formal cause. What will it be shaped into? What kind of form will it take? So you have the shape, the blueprint. What will it look like when you're done? Then you have the efficient cause, which is the work that you put into to make it happen, the shaping itself to make it happen. And then the final cause to me is the most interesting because it means the purpose or function, what it's meant to be. And this is fate or destiny. Apropos that question, we'll come back to it. Destiny and fate is the same thing. So let me say it right now. So I don't need to repeat that. Okay?
Yeah, I'm just adjusting it. Okay, be yourself.
Destiny and fate is the same idea. So, but to the normal ear, it sounds different because fate has a negative connotation. Sounds like something bad is happening. While destiny is, yes, I will find the cure for cancer. I'll be the president of the country. I'll be the best, the famous author or something. So destiny has a positive ring to it, but fate has a negative. But in the mechanics of it, it's the same. It's the same thing. It's something that you get to. No, later. But I just wanted to say it again. To me, it's the same thing. Okay. So let me continue. So to illustrate that, and I didn't invent this, I think I read it somewhere, maybe even in Aristotle, that apropos the final cause, that's to me the most interesting thing in this whole set of causes, the function, what it's meant to be. So an acorn contains the future oak tree. You have an oak tree, it started from the acorn. So the acorn is the seed. So the big tree was inside the acorn, like a seed, and it became a tree. So the acorn cannot become anything else. The acorn will become an oak tree, no other tree. And if it's in the forest, you have a few shrubs growing on the ground, and those shrubs look at the big tree and they say, gee, I want to be as big as that tree. No, you are a shrub. So it's the DNA. It's the DNA that determines the DNA biologically or the chart astrologically or the cosmos with these four causes. But there's something that determines how far you can get and where you can end up, what you can be. So that's the example with the acorn. I'm at the bottom here. So what's the implication of that? The implication is also related to fate because the final cause necessitates all the steps that came before it. The final cause requires that whatever brought it into being were there already. And I'm right there. So I'm saying that destiny or purpose is the same thing. Purpose, destiny, what it's meant to be, to me is one concept. So the destiny or the purpose determines how something comes into being. And I'm saying that the future dictates the past. Sometimes I say to my student and they get like, how can that be? Because we are used to, in our regular, normal, modern thinking, we're very used to saying that we have something which is called A, and A causes B, and B causes C. But according to this, it's the other way around. C, I call it necessity. It doesn't cause it necessity. It has to be there. C necessitates B, and B necessitates A, and we can go back in time and history. One time, long time ago, I read a short story, and I cannot find it, by Mark Twain, on an essay by Mark Twain, and he describes how him being here on Earth where he was is a result of Hannibal crossing the Alps in ancient Rome. And he takes you back in a chain of events, all the way to Hannibal in ancient Rome, which is 3,000 years ago or something, or 2,500 years ago. So that's the idea, that everything had to be there for you to be here. And I'm saying, so the future dictates the past. So if I use myself as an example, if I'm supposed to stand here and deliver this talk to you and do all the things that I do, and you heard it from Danny, It's because of all the chain of events that came before it that brought me here to New York City, to this point, to do that. And that's how you need to see your life. That's my opinion. And I'm saying that your parents had, if you do it on a personal level, you can say your parents had to be there for you to be here. That's how it works. So time flows, causality flows backward, not forward, my opinion. Very hard to get that notion, but that's how I see it. Next. So this was Aristotle, and I cut short a lot of things. I had more material. I decided to skip a lot. So now I'll still do that. No, we don't need that. We can skip that, the rest of this one. And now we end the Greek period with Stoicism. Stoicism is interesting because even today, when you follow biographies or people who are successful and they say why they're successful and what they did, and you read and hear about their personal philosophies, many times you'll hear or you'll read that they practice Stoicism now in our time, not limited to ancient Greece. So what does Stoicism tell us? Stoicism teaches how to throw off the shackle of faith. So there's recognition of faith, but then how do you get rid of it or how do you throw it off? And they tell you by accepting or becoming indifferent. That's the key. Acceptance is one thing, but to be indifferent to it is a whole other mental exercise. To become indifferent to fate, to worldly events. So Stoicism assumes that there is a will, the individual has a will, like autonomous, like what you think you have, what we think we have, a will on the one hand, but then there's also a deterministic world on the other. So what's the difference? First of all, they tell you to accept the fate. Acceptance is the first act. Acceptance, and by accepting, you create a whole new view of life. And the wise, about here, the wise people live in harmony with the divine reason that governs nature. Again, divine reason is the one that dictates everything, that ananke, but you have to live in harmony with it, meaning accept it as is, not rebel against it. And you have to cultivate that. You have to cultivate this indifference. It doesn't come easy. You have to cultivate it and practice that so that the vicissitudes of life, the ups and the downs of life, pleasure, or pain or pleasure, both are the same category. You have to become indifferent because they're not the most important thing. So pleasure and pain is on a material level, bodily pleasure, bodily pain, all this on a material level. So what they're telling you that anything on the material level, you need to become indifferent. The only thing you really care about is what they call virtue. And virtue is up here. It's in the mind. What's in the mind is the first, that's what you care about. And the text here says Stoicism teaches that virtue is the highest good. Mental, not physical, not material. It's what you have, your mental values. That's what matters. And if the world is not what you like, you don't change it, you adapt to it. It's about adapting and becoming indifferent to the extreme situation, good or bad. I think that that's how we live, whether we know it or not. Even in practicing astrology, that's actually what we practice and what we teach in astrology. Now I'm talking about being an astrologer. You teach yourself, and I teach myself and my students and my family how to separate yourself from the events, distance yourself from the events in some way, and know that that's what it is, and you cannot control it. And by distancing yourself, you protect yourself in some way, protect yourself mentally. Easier said than done. We know that, but that's the idea. So you create indifference. I'm not an expert on Eastern philosophies, but maybe it's something like a Zen or something. The idea to become indifferent is to step back from it, create a distance. So it's not me, it's I'm here and that is over there. Whatever it is, it's there. So you become more calm, more balanced, more mental equilibrium, and you are basically creating some basis of happiness, but mental happiness. Again, easier said than done. But that's Stoicism, and it exists in our time. And I think that when you think about it, a lot of what we do in astrology or what we teach and how we practice it is exactly that. How to distance yourself from the actual events when they're difficult. Okay. Now I take you to astrology, classical astrology. Let's see what fate says in classical astrology. So first I'm saying that Hellenistic astrology, and I'm talking Hellenistic, I'm not talking beyond that. Hellenistic. Hellenistic is the first 200 years or so. The first century, second century, and we have texts, as you probably know, we have texts from those from that period. We also have some information prior to that era, but that information is not in books, but it's quoted in some other books. So we know a little about astrology that was practiced. This goes back to Egypt. When we say Hellenistic astrology, we're talking about Alexandria. I don't want to make it a history lesson, but you're talking about Alexandria in Egypt. So Hellenistic astrology flourished in Alexandria, and I'm not going to explain why. It's a history lesson. We'll leave it alone. But the roots, but as a result, Hellenistic astrology absorbed a few things from prior periods, and it appears in quotes in different mentions here and there. So this is the period we're talking about. This is after the Babylonian era. That's what pertaining to what Daniel said, and I'll come back to it when it comes to the Jewish part. So it's after the Babylonian era. Actually, in the Hellenistic era, astrology became exactly what we do now. Everything that you do now in astrology, planets and houses and aspects started there. It's all there, not later. So the astrology that you practice is, I would say, 2,000 years old easily. All the components, all the main components were there from the start. So this Hellenistic literature does not deal with fate, with a couple of exceptions. Okay, so it doesn't stand out. When you go to the material, you read planets and this and that. You don't read discussions on fate. You have to look for it to find it, but it's there. But you have to look for it. And another thing that's interesting about Hellenistic astrology, we think that they're Hellenistic, they're close to the old eras. You don't see any mention of mythology, any mention of the Hellenistic gods, nothing. Not even God, no reference. Occasionally you have reference to supreme power. It's not called God. But other than that, it's straightforward, straight vanilla flavor of basic astrology. These are the texts. But you have to read closely and then you discover things. And that's what I've been doing recently, to see where is any mention of fate. Actually, I've been doing it a long time ago, but recently I put it together for this lecture. So now we are talking about this one. So we have two names that come up for this lecture. One is Ptolemy, and the other one is going to be Vettius Valens. So Ptolemy wrote the famous book called the Tetrabiblos, and it's a straightforward astrology book, very interesting. There's a lot that I could say about it. But for my topic today, I am saying that in the Tetrabiblos, at the very first chapter, the introduction, what he does, he defends astrology. 2,000 years ago, no, 1,800 years ago, he defended astrology against people who debunk it, knock it down, and detractors and so on. In other words, astrology always had to defend itself. There's not one time that astrology was fully accepted. So he's defending astrology. So he's defending astrology against criticism and this and that. And he said that these people are ignorant and they criticize it because they cannot get it. They're too simple. They're too stupid. That's one thing. And then he goes on to compare astrology, the whole mechanism, to nature, to cycle of nature. Ptolemy is all about nature. Everything is replica of cycles of nature, everything, which is an interesting thing. So, and then he moved on to try and prove astrology by saying that it's about prognostication. So how does he want to defend astrology? By taking the topic of prognostication, telling the future, and saying that astrology allows you to prognosticate. The same way as the farmer can prognosticate how the crop will be in the field if there's enough rain, the astrologer can predict things for a person's life. But it's about prediction. But then he says, when prognostication fails, why would it fail? That does not mean that astrology doesn't work. It means two things. It means that sometimes there are forces that are greater than what we can change, what we can affect. And he uses medicine. He uses his examples with medicine. So a person is ill, then the doctor will prescribe something and the person will get better, or the person will not get better and die. So if the person got better, thanks to the doctor, we did it. The person did it. The doctor did it. But if the sick person did not get better, it's because there are higher forces that are stronger than the lower forces. So right there and then, there's recognition of the higher forces. He said that. Again, higher forces decide and you cannot change it. That's one situation. And then he said, there's another situation when prognostication fails, and that could be error of judgment. And then he said, okay, but if a doctor made an error, it doesn't mean that the whole science of medicine should be thrown out in the garbage. Or if the pilot of a ship, or the captain of a ship made an error and the ship sank, it doesn't mean that the whole study of navigation is no good. So that's the simple, basic explanation. He defends astrology. So he doesn't really talk about fate as much, but it's hidden in this whole discussion. But then he says one last thing, which is very interesting, and that I noticed many years ago. He said that, I call it, he became stoic. He doesn't say it, but I say he became stoic. Because he talks about the benefit of knowing the future, the benefit. Again, the future is determined. So what's the benefit of knowing it? It's a very stoic approach. He says, and it's in quotes here, because knowing the future calms the soul by being prepared for whatever might come. Simple as that. And that's exactly Stoicism. And that's a quote from Tetrabiblos. I quoted it word for word. It calms the soul. By the way, the word soul, when you read through the Tetrabiblos and you see the word soul, you need to know that in that language, that soul is not what we think of soul. It's not that spiritual thing. It's the mind. It's the word psyche in the Greek language, psyche. It's the mind, from the word psychology. It's the mind. We need to know that before we read too much spirituality into that word in the ancient texts, in the old text. So we need to know how the words are used. So that's Ptolemy. That's as far as he goes in terms of fate. And I looked up and down through the Tetrabiblos. That's it, the only place. And it's an introduction. Apropos, when you read old text, I highly recommend read the introduction. There's gold nuggets in those introductions. And that's an example of that. It's his introduction. Okay. Now we move to Vetus Valens, and I love this part because now we go back to the lots, to Moira and the lot. Okay, the lot in life. So Vetus Valens is a contemporary of Ptolemy, more or less. They lived in the same century. There's no no evidence that they met each other or anything, but it's the same era. The writing is very different, but I'm not going to discuss that. The Tetrabiblos and Vetus Valens, very different style of astrology. And Vetus Valens has a lot to say about fate. And where does he say it? Not philosophically, but through this, what I said, the lot of fortune, what I mentioned earlier. So we have the word lot, and lot means your lot in life. The word lottery means just that. It's your lot in life, whatever happens. And that lot is determined by Fortuna, fortune. Fortuna was a goddess, not a major goddess, but one tier below was Fortuna. And there's another name for Fortuna, I think I'm saying it right, Tyche, Tyche, same goddess, different names. Tyche, I think. Elvis.
Yes.
What's the right pronunciation? Tyche or Tyche?
Tiki.
Say it again.
The Greek word is tiki.
Tiki? Tiki. She knows Greek. My friend and my good friend. Yes. Okay. I'll say Tyche. Everybody's okay. But it's the spelling is Tyche. Not here. Okay. So it's all about how this lot of fortune works in the chart. And I'm not going to make it a class on how I use it, but I use it religiously. You need to know that it's not a planet, it's a calculated point. It's a calculated point derived from the sun and the moon and the ascendant. Becomes a point in the chart and it's magical. It's magical because it has a lot to say in the natal chart as well, and it's predictive. And in predictive, it does exactly what Valence wants to tell you, that it's your fortune in life, your ups and your downs, and how you can be up for a certain part of your life, and then it can be down. Not always down. You can be down and up, or you can have a continued, consistent up. There's no rule here. It's how it works in a particular chart. It's very specific in a chart, and that's how it's analyzed. Should get excited, so I stood. Okay. So he says, and I'm reading at the bottom, for those who come down in life after a period of a good start, he says, these men bear their abasement nobly and yield to the laws of fate. That's a quote. So here's the word fate again. In other words, if you think you had it good and now you're down on your luck, he says they bear it nobly. That's very, very stoic. Again, it's stoicism. In my opinion, it's a version of stoicism. Be able to separate yourself, to distance yourself, and take it in stride, and not get destroyed by that. That's Vetus Valens. So if you read between the lines and you see the connection with the Moiras and the Lot and Plato and this and that, they all work together. So as I was preparing for this, and I really went through this material a lot, I realized how much of that Greek philosophy is still in astrology, but it's hiding in all these techniques and all these nuances. So to me, that's what astrology is all about. It's philosophy, like I said. It's not psychology. I'm not interested in psychology. I'm very much into that kind of understanding of the mechanism of the astrological chart. So this is the astrology part. And now we move to, what do I have here? No, I'm going to skip that. It's detailed. Vetus Valens has more details how this whole thing works. He talks about hope and the necessity and how they work together. That's too much information. So now we move to religion. What's faith in religion? And I'm going to make it very simple, because we're not going to have a whole semester on this topic. It's simple because the religions are simple that way when it comes to faith. It's very simple, no complication at all. Well, you see here, picture my favorite thing, Moses bring the tablet down from the mountain. And by the way, this is the actual mountain, Mount Sinai, in the Negev, in the Sinai desert. And this is a monastery, the Christian monastery there. And the tablets, you can imagine them. Okay, so I am, okay. So now, what about faith and religion? What's the crux of it, the real root of the whole faith? I'm saying that monotheistic religion, by definition, necessitates free will. You have to have, religion needs free will. Because if you have free will, you can choose between good and evil. And that's what religion wants you to do. Choose between good and evil. All the monotheistic religion are based on that, regardless which one you look at. In order to choose, free will needs to be assumed. It's as simple as that. So I hear it a lot in conferences. I used to hear it. People sit around the table and say, oh, religion, the church is so closed-minded, they're so short-sighted, they don't really understand, and they're so backward, and they're closed-minded. That's usually what young astrologers or beginners, I'm going to limit it to young astrologers, think about relationship between astrology and religion. They think that the opposition to religion is because they're closed-minded. No, they're not closed-minded. They know very well why they criticize astrology, because astrology is fatalistic by definition. Astrology is about predetermination. The natal chart is the map for life. And religion cannot take it, because religion will not function on fate. It has to be open-ended. You have to be able to choose good or evil. And they know it. So astrologers need to train themselves a little bit better on these philosophies. And that is why understanding religion is important. You don't have to go to church or the synagogue to understand religion, but you need to understand the role of it and where it's coming from and how it treats and understands life, the process of life. So I'm going to go very quickly through these. It's very simple. These are what I call the tenets, and they're universal. It's not Jewish or Christian. It's universal thing. And I'm saying that when the transition moved from Greek philosophy to the major religions, especially started with Judaism and continued, and Christianity, then I'm saying that the Greek values of personal responsibility, personal values, changed into values that came from the mountain, from God. God told you what the values are on those tablets. So it's a law. It's a law. It's not values. It's the law. God gives you the laws, especially the Jewish God. A lot of laws, and all these laws are given to humanity from one God, an omniscient God, God that knows everything, responsible for everything. It's one source, and it comes down, the laws. So the tenets, and I'm going to go very quickly through that. So there's only one God in Judaism. It is a statement that's repeated on every other page. There's one God. So it's unity. That's very important. The oneness is very important. And that one God is the creator. And that the act of creation, it might seem to you like an insignificant point in philosophy. It's major in philosophy between Judaism and the astrology. Major difference. And Maimonides picks up on that later. Because a God that can create at will, whatever God wants to create, God decided to create the shrubs and the trees and the fish, and God at will. It's an act of a will by God. So if God has the will to create, then if God wants to save you, God will make a miracle for you and will change things. So God can change. If God can create the laws of nature, God can change the laws of nature. And that's the idea. That's why the understanding of the act of creation is, or the meaning of creation is very important to philosophy. And then I'm saying that now that God in an act of revelation and creates brings down the law to people, to humanity, and there's a covenant, a pact is made between God and people. I say God has a relationship with people. And the covenant means it's, covenant, it's a treaty, a covenant. And it's very simple. The covenant says, if you obey my laws, you will be okay. If you don't obey my laws, you will suffer. Suffer means adversity, illness, famine, hunger, hurricanes, you name it. It's all from God if you don't obey the laws. This is very fundamental. In Judaism, it repeats in many places. If you're Jewish or you've heard about it, I put in Hebrew here, I put this phrase, Kriyat Shema. You may be familiar with that. It's a short passage and it contains everything that I just told you. The covenant. This is what I told you to do. You follow it and you will be okay. You will be protected from the wrath of the world. And because God is omnipotent, God can do whatever God wants because God has the power. Then if you do the right thing, if you pray, if you are in adversity and you pray and you do penance and forgiveness and redemption and all that, God will help you. God will save you from something. That's the source of people who believe in prayer because they believe that God is listening personally. And if you're doing the right thing, God will show up and will help you. I'm not telling you what my opinion is about prayer, but I'm saying that that's a result of understanding that God is the creator. So it's one fact, God is the creator. From that, you get a chain of conclusions. And that's one of them. God can save you when you do the right thing, or you deserve it or something. Okay. Yet there's still unresolved question, and they never left. Huge unresolved question. So you can believe in all the commandments, and you follow the rules, and you follow the laws. And believe me, in Jewish life, Orthodox Jewish life, 24 hours, 24/7, you're doing the right thing. There's a prescribed, detailed instruction how to do this and how to do that, and how to do with food and dress and personal relationship and marriage, you name it. Everything is regulated. And Orthodox people live by that, and they believe that that's how it's done, and they do it. So you have these different approaches to some very extremes, some more relaxed, some very relaxed. I'm in the relaxed camp, but the thing is, if you personally, apropos Judaism, you realize that I'm Jewish, of course, and I was born in Israel, and I grew up in the secular part of life in Israel, not in any religious background, but I have always, it's a personal thing, I've always known about every detail of Judaism. Nothing was foreign to me. I just didn't practice it, but I knew everything. Another fact of my life is that when I came to live in New York, my Judaism all of a sudden became more Jew. But I grew up knowing about all that, knowing it and loving it as intellectually or emotionally. Not that I practiced, but I just knew it. So these things are very close to my heart personally. Anyway, so what are those issues that are still remained with all this omniscient and omnipotent God? Okay. And that is here. Why do bad things happen to good people? That has never been answered. Because if there's one God, that one God is responsible for all the adversity as well. So why do bad things happen to good people? And why is there evil in the world? That has not been answered. Why does God tolerate evil? And when you look around and you read the news every day in every country and every 10 years, you know what I'm talking about. I don't need to tell you the details. Why is it? That has never been answered. The Jewish mysticism called Kabbalah tries to answer it. But again, I call it a cop-out. It's not exactly an answer. Now, why is it a difficult question and difficult answer? Because if there's one God, not two gods, one force in the universe, that one force is also giving you the evil, not just the good. So how can that be? Why does evil exist? Has never been answered. And it becomes very acute and very painful when very bad things happen and you see them happen. There's no answer. The last line, the last one here says, is there duality in the heavens? That's another question. What do we mean by duality? There's God, and they're responsible for the good in the world. So there's another force that's responsible for the evil, and you know the name. It's called Satan. And we do have the concept that there is a Satan. It's not new. Sometimes it comes back, but in old days, in the Talmudic time and the old history of Western society and in the Middle East, the belief that there is two forces in the universe was very palpable. People believed that there's God and there is the other one, and that's unacceptable to a religion that believes in one God. That's a contradiction. So these people who are believing, quote unquote, Satan, they believe that there's a completely separate force, independent, and that does its own thing. And we have to battle. It's like the battle between dark and light, between good and evil. So that's how some people look at the world. While people who believe in one God, they have a philosophical problem because it cannot be resolved. So it remains as a question. But that's a proper religion. So you see, all these tie into fate because it's what happens to life and who decides and how it's decided. That's it. Now I'm moving to. Okay, I'm not reading this text, but now I'm moving to fate in Jewish tradition later than that. So all this was like an intro. I'm gonna stay here for a minute. Yeah, that's right here. I have to be here. Yeah. In Jewish tradition, and I'm talking about text and writing and literature. In the Bible, which is the Old Testament, no discussion about faith, nothing, except for one book in the Bible, and you probably know about it, the book of Job. Job is a righteous man, and then God and Satan talk to each other, or the bad angel, and they say, let's try his face. Let's see if he's really, really faithful, if he's really a righteous person. So his son dies and he loses everything and he complains to God, why did you do it? In other words, the book of Job repeats the question, why do bad things happen to good people? And God speaks to Job. And basically, God says to Job, you know what? You don't really know, and I'm not going to tell you. You just have to accept the fact that I know everything, I created everything, and you have to trust me. And then the end of the book, to make it a little bit better, the happy end, Job restores his wealth and his household and so on. But he goes through this crisis. Why did it happen to me? All these bad things. So that's the only place in the Bible that touches that. But later on means the historical period after the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, and that's the 1st century. The year is 70 A.D. or CE, I would say. That changed completely the life of the Jewish people. And they went into exile big time, exile into Babylon. And now comes something about your question about astrology and Jews in Babylon. So that was the era. So the great numbers of Jewish people and communities were exiled into Babylon. They created flourishing community. They're very successful, and centers of learning and so on. This is Babylon about the first 2 centuries. And so that was the era when astrology flourished in the Middle East. That was exactly the time of the Hellenistic astrology. Those first 2 centuries were Hellenistic, spread around the region, not just Alexandria, the whole region knew it. And the Jewish people, I say they always are in their time and of their time. They're not insulated and isolated in their communities. They know what's going on. They're interested in all the learning that's going around them. And that included astrology. And astrology, like I said, from the Hellenistic time. So it's already advanced astrology, real astrology, not just a god here and there, but planets and so on. So we find, okay, so that era, past the destruction of the first temple, is the second temple, and the exile, the big exile that happened, produced what's known as the Talmud. The Talmud is a compilation, 500 years of compilation, collection of Jewish tradition, Jewish law, Jewish wisdom, everything that has to do with Jewish tradition and religion, and interpretation upon interpretation upon interpretation of the Bible and every layers of things that were written afterwards. So it's like huge number of volumes, like you need a big bookshelf to house that collection of books. It's called a Talmud. But my thing is that Talmud was created in that part of the world where astrology flourished, Babylonia. And that's astrology that I said from the Hellenistic period. And the Jewish people were curious as always, and they knew what was going on. And in this Talmud, there are many references to astrology, which is surprising. And those references are like, if I read this to you, you would recognize it, like things that we do in astrology. I'll sample some of it for you verbally without showing too much, because it takes a lot of time. So they knew astrology. What's interesting that the question of fate came right away in the middle of this whole thing. There are some, I'll show you, some of the questions that are brought up in the astrological discussion in the Talmud touch directly on fate, directly. So I'll show you those. Most Jewish people that you know are not familiar with the Talmud. You really have to be a connoisseur of Jewish learning to get involved into that. Actually, tonight I'm missing a Talmud class because I'm here, because in my synagogue there is a Talmud class every Wednesday. But you know what I like about Wednesday? You know, it's the day of Mercury.
That's right.
Yes.
It's the day of Mercury. So it's very appropriate. Anyway, so all these nuggets I collected, and I call them nuggets because they're not concentrated in one place. You have to dig and dig and dig to find these references to astrology. Just about all of them, all these references include something about fate, which is really surprising or interesting. Let me show you, explain some of them, and I'm not going to go detailed, I'll just do bullet style. Otherwise, we'll never finish here. So, the Talmud. So this slide I used to explain what I said about the area, the geography of the Babylonia, the geography of the land of Israel, and so on and so on. So you all know the map. So Babylonia is southern Iraq. Interestingly enough, again, it's things that I like to think about, unrelated to tonight's topic, but I have to say that. That area, southern Iraq, is where Abraham came from, the patriarch, the first Jewish person came from there, from Ur. Ur is a location in southern Iraq. And I like to play with the words. I like to think that Ur is maybe Uranus, and maybe because Abraham left his home. God told him, take your family and leave home. And by leaving home, it's another discussion. He started the whole new history. And Abraham is actually considered an astrologer. It is said that he was an astrologer. At least he knew how to look at the sky. I don't want to digress too much. I'm really digressing here, so leave it alone. But this is where the whole thing started. And if you historically, Abraham, it would be more or less, very more or less, 1800, maybe 1800 BCE. That era in Babylonia and Sumeria was the rudimentary beginning of astrology. We have tablets, which Danny mentioned, tablets on cuneiform, and the famous one is the Venus tablet. And I saw it, Danny, in the British Museum. It's a tiny little thing. I knew about it all my life. I go there, it's a tiny thing. So some of this remained, but those tablets with these rudimentary cosmic observations or astronomical observation, very rudimentary. It's not a chart, not even close. So I don't want to discuss that. But it was not yet astrology the way we know it. So astrology the way we know it, you have to go to the Hellenistic period in Egypt and Alexandria. Good enough. But that's what it is that. Actually, astrology moved from Babylonia to Alexandria without bypassing Greece. Greece did not have that. So the whole, we call it Hellenistic, but the migration of astrology did not go to Greece. It went directly here. It has to do with Alexander the Great and the Greek Empire and so on. So I'm jumping all over the place here. Anyway, so in other words, those people in Babylonia, the Jewish people, they were exposed to astrology, they were interested, and it shows up in those books. So let me show you a sample, some of these, and I'm going to be very brief, and please forgive me for too much text on the screen. It's like my notes and my material. So I'm not going to read all this. Oh, something going to indulge me. I use it my chain or something.
I'll get a laser pen.
Something. Okay. I think
I think a laser pen would be good for like a pointer,
Yeah.
right? Okay, I'll buy one for next. We'll have it.
you know, it's not worth it. Next time, Danny,
Yeah, yeah.
I'll just use my just a pen something. So I want to explain some basic. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, perfect. Yep. I know what it is. Yep, great. So I'm going to sample for you some of those statements and why they're super interesting. So I start with this one. Knowledge and calculation of the heavens, meaning calculation of the cycles and so on, the new moon, the sun and the seasons, that's the calculation of the heaven. Knowledge and calculation of the heaven is a mitzvah. So what's a mitzvah? It's a Hebrew word. Mitzvah can be understood as a commandment from the Torah, or a good deed, or the right thing to do. It's a combination of these things, something that you should do, but it's in a positive way. That's mitzvah. So they're telling you that calculation of the heavens is a mitzvah. It's a good thing. You should know how to calculate. But they say calculate. They don't say read a chart. And there's a whole explanation there. I'm not going to repeat that. But at least it tells you you need to know how to calculate. Actually, those calculations were necessary to determine the new moon, which is the first of the month, the lunar month. So you need to know that's the main thing, because the calendar was lunar. And also I don't know if I say solar return, but the return of the sun and so on, the length of the year when it's a new year, not just a new month. So those are the calculations that tell you need to know that to be a complete scholar. If you're a scholar, you need to know that. The other word is very interesting. It's mazal. You may have heard this. If you live in New York, you've heard a lot of mazel tov, right? Mazel tov. What's mazel tov? Mazel tov is mazal tov. That's Hebrew. Tov means good. Means have a good mazal. So what's mazal? Also a very loaded word when you look at the meaning of that. Number one, in modern Hebrew, mazal is used in regular language. It's luck. Simple luck, good luck, bad luck, luck. But it's more interesting because in astrology, mazal is the astrological sign, one of the 12. Wow. There are 12 signs, 12 mazalot. Simple. But in the rabbinical literature and also in the Talmudic literature, The word mazal is used very generically, like a whole constellation of planetary setup. If the Talmud says your mazal caused that, they mean the whole setup when you were born, not just one sign or another. So we need to know that, because we will encounter that exact use of that language. That's why I wanted to. The word mazal is even more interesting. The etymology of it goes into Arabic, into the word manzil, it has to do with the lunar mansion, and on and on and on. Very interesting. But for us tonight, this is enough. The word mazal. Now we have, so that's the first thing I wanted to bring up. Now we have, that's a central argument, very central. You have the Hebrew, but I must translate, of course. So we start with the phrase, Ein mazal Israel. Ein. Israel is not Israel the state, but Israel is a collective name for the nation. Okay? For the Jewish nation. That's the root of the word. So, in other words, the Jewish people are not subject to the stars. Ein, ein means no. There's no mazal to Jewish people, but on condition. How can the Jewish people not be subject to mazal? If they keep the Torah and the mitzvot, simple, it's a condition. You keep the laws, you're free from the mazal. You're above it. That's the idea. As simple as it gets. It doesn't need more explanation. That's the basic philosophy. And that's what most people, Jewish people, will tell you when they think about astrology. If you talk to anyone who is semi-religious, that's all they know. Ein mazal, that's all they know. They don't know everything that goes into it. Ein mazal, meaning don't do astrology. It doesn't apply to us. We're not under the influence of the stars. But on condition, you have to do the right things. Okay, live a life of virtue, abide the law, follow the rules. So that's the condition. But what's interesting, in the same Talmud, in the same book, I found another rabbi, but before I continue, this Ein Mazal Israel is what I call the party line. That's what it's quoted all the time. Meaning, don't question it, don't study it, not relevant to you. Forget, astrology is not relevant to us, does not influence us. I call it the party line. The rabbi will tell you that some. But there's another rabbi in the Talmud that says, Yesh Mazal Israel. Yesh means there is. There is a Mazal to Israel. There is a Mazal. And then he continues to say, good fortune does not depend on virtue, but on Mazal. Extreme statement, like in your face. Wrong. Yesh Mazal. There is Mazal to the Jewish people. And he comes up with an example. I love that one. The example is there were two men, both of them lived a righteous life, they did the right thing, they followed the mitzvah, they followed everything, and yet one of them had a very wonderful, wealthy life, and plenty of food, and a big house, while the other one lived in poverty, children died, the dogs have nothing to eat, while the rich fellow, even the dogs eat rich food. And they both followed the mitzvah. They both did the right thing. So how come one was successful and the other one was in poverty? Because of the mazal. That's what he says. The mazal caused it. It's a very extreme statement. And it's not quoted. This one, the Ein Mazal, no, that's what's quoted. Okay, so that's the next one. Now, personal responsibility, I'm going to simplify it a lot. It says that two things it says. All is foreseeable. I broke down the word all to mean all outcomes, all possibilities. So everything is foreseeable, everything is possible or predictable. But choice is given. Again, choice. Religion is based on choice. So you can choose between good and evil. You can choose to do this or that. You choose the possibilities that are available to you. Like I said, there's fork in the road, left or right, you choose. Simple attitude, very simple. And they also say that all in the hands of God except for the fear of God. In other words, this personal responsibility includes the worship of God itself. Following the law is also the responsibility. So this is playing with the idea. It's like nuancing it. I call it cop out, I call it excuses or something, but it's obvious that there is a recognition, there's something called mazal, there's recognition of fate. And all this is machination of ideas. How do we evade it? How do we modify it? So fate is the elephant in the room all the time. In every system, it's there. And when you have all these nuances, it's machination to resolve contradiction. Okay, next is evidence of knowledge in astrology. I'm not going to do the detail, but in this section, it's clear. This is like if I was teaching astrology, I would be using this. And sometimes I use this information. It's describing personal character based on the day you're born. It's the planetary day and hour. Literally, every one of these lines is describing character, personality. Modern astrology is what we do now. And that's from the Talmud. So they knew astrology. In the same way, there is the same similar and based on not the planetary, the daily ruler, but the hour, planetary hour. It's like they tell each other, you know what? The mazal of the day is not enough. It's too generic. So let's go to the mazal of the hour. It's like saying we need an ascendant to make it more specific. Say they go to the planet of the hour, and they do the same thing with character. Now, here is something that is very modern as well. So after this whole discussion, two of them have a discussion, and one says to the other, to the one who came up with this, like they say, Rabbah said, I was born in the hour of Mars, meaning, but I'm not a killer, I'm not a murderer. Well, I was born in the hour of Mars. So the other guy says to him, but you punish and kill. He was a judge. A judge issues a sentence, maybe death sentence. So in other words, you're still manifesting the Mars. And that's what we say, that we manifest the planet on different levels. In another place, not here, I have an example. I think it's right here actually. One born in the hour of Mars, this is exactly what we say in our understanding in astrology. One born in the hour of Mars will be bloodshedding, and someone says, but that person can be a craftsman, or a robber, or a butcher, or a mohel. Mohel is the one who does circumcision. You're using the knife. In other words, Mars can manifest in all these levels. Some of them are good for society, some of them are criminal. Same Mars. This is recognition that the planet can manifest in different levels. Modern astrology. It's what we say the same thing now. And this is the Talmud.
Can you plug in your computer because it's starting to run low on power? Your
One
laptop.
second, I need to do it more quickly. Matrimonial law. The Talmud deals with law a lot. A lot of the Talmud is about law and law, literally like law in court. Matrimonial law, but look at that. They say a woman who marries one and he dies, when she marries another one and later dies. And that and if she marries a third one, then she should not marry again. Why? Because it's her mazal that kills these men. They say that. They say in the discussion that what causes the Rabbi Asher says, mazal causes, that's a quote, mazal causes that. Clear recognition that it's not from God, it's the mazal. And it's in the Talmud. Jewish like. Okay, so that's matrimonial law.
We just want to plug in your computer.
Responsibility for financial loss. Think of an insurance company when we talk about that.
We just want to plug in your computer because it's running low on energy.
Oh, I need,
I'm
I
sorry to
need
interrupt.
power. Oh my God.
Sorry.
Yes. Good thing you noticed because it's running the batteries. Okay, we take this part and 1 second. Okay. Okay, it's charging. Okay. Responsibility for financial loss. And it's also logical. So the discussion is about compensation due to when someone hires a donkey from someone else, and that donkey gets confiscated by the authorities. Who suffered the loss? The owner of the donkey or the one who hired the donkey? So whose mazal is it? It's exactly what it's saying. Whose responsibility? The mazal. Whose mazal is responsible? Not what you did, it's your mazal that did. But there's a better one. I think I have it. Individual and the collective, the same thing is financial. In a case of leasing a field from another, is the landowner entitled to full payment when the renter incurred losses due to locust or drought or something like that? You lease a land from someone, you hope to grow things and make money, but it's not happening. Locust, drought, whatever, but you have to pay the lease. So are you responsible? So they make a differentiation between it's really only your mazal, or is it the mazal of the whole country? The whole country suffered that inflection. So it's differentiation between individual mazal and mazal of the collective. It's very fine-tuning. It's very subtle discussion about whose mazal, and it's not from God, it's the mazal. Okay, so this is the sampling from the Talmud to show you that it's there, it's detailed, and all these questions had to do with fate, all of them. But mazal is fate, because if it's your mazal, it's your fate. So now we come to this one. Okay, fast forward into the 12th century, and the plot thickens. Okay. So until now, it was kind of simple. We saw the exact astrology, we saw it talks about fate and so on. So in the 12th century, we have two figures, Ibn Ezra and Maimonides. The year is 1194. So what happened at that time? In 1194, a group of scholars from a Jewish community in Provence, southern France, wrote a letter to Maimonides, seeking his opinion and help in resolving penetrating questions about astrology. As simple as that. It's a very famous letter. It's in print, and I translated it as well to English. And it's called The Correspondence Between the Rabbis of the South of France and Maimonides, but it's a long name, but it describes what it is. Correspondence. Maimonides, a few words about Maimonides so you know who's role in this. Maimonides was a very well-renowned philosopher. He lived in Cairo, Egypt, after the family escaped persecutions and so on in Spain. Ended up in Cairo, and he became a famous physician in the court of the Sultan. That was his day job. In addition to the day job, he wrote significant works in Jewish theology. 2 books. One of them is well known among philosophers. It's called The Guide for the Perplexed, very well known. The other one is known among the Jews, but he was a huge authority in the Jewish world. Authority because of his learning and his stature as a leader. He became a leader. And in those days, when people had questions on any topic, a community question, whatever, they would write to the leader for answers. And that's what they did. These scholars from Provence wrote to Maimonides, and they asked him very detailed astrological questions. And I'll show you some of them. Detail, I mean, question that my students will ask me, which shows the level of knowledge and the level of practice that they did, that they used. They really practiced it. And they wrote to him with these questions, with the detail, because they assumed that he knows astrology and he uses it. So they're very simple. Okay, I need to speed up. So, and they write a letter with detailed question, and then he responds. His response is very different from what they expected. Bottom line, he tells them, forget astrology, it's nonsense, don't believe it, and destroys the faith, you don't want it, it's nonsense, it's not proper for Jewish people, forget it. Just think of it as a tree, cut the tree from the root and continue to be faithful Jewish people. He supports his arguments, he has some detail, I'm not going to take you through it, but it's interesting that actually, I'll come to it later, but I'll say it now. He supports that big argument, another big rejection of astrology. He supports it with philosophical details based on Aristotle and Plato. He supports it from the from the Jewish tradition by itself, the role of the prophet and Moses and the Torah and so on. He has quite a list of arguments why he's rejected. That list is interesting. It can be elaborated into 4 volumes of books, which we're not going to do today. But you need to know that he's coming from all this background, and he knows what he's doing. He's not closed-minded. He knows what he's doing. He knows that people whom he thinks are too simple to have this level of knowledge, they should not even try to resolve these contradictions. Don't even try, because you cannot understand it. In a way, he was an elitist, and he followed Plato that way also. So he combined ideas from Plato and from Aristotle in his philosophy, and he tried to resolve differences with the Jewish religion in that book, Guide for the Perplexed. But it was so complicated and so fine nuanced that he didn't think simple people can get it. So that rather than try and get it, just forget the whole thing. Forget astrology, it's nonsense. It's not, the stars are not responsible for your life. Do the right thing and forget it. That was his response. But let's see what they wrote, just sample of the questions, just a sample. And what do I have here? Ibn Ezra. A few words about Ibn Ezra. Why is Ibn Ezra in this story? Because the letter was to Maimonides. Ibn Ezra was also from that era, but they never met. Ibn Ezra, you probably know, wrote extensively about Jewish topics, but he also wrote extensively about astrology. His astrology is not well known among Jewish people, but his other writings is very well known. So to this day, he's a big authority on biblical interpretation. But we are interested in his astrological side, astrological writing. Ibn Ezra wandered throughout his life. He wandered all over Europe. He never had a real home. Wandered from community to community, and while he was on the road, he wrote all his works. I like to call him road scholar because of that. He was on the road. Being on the road in the year 1148, he was in that community that later on wrote that letter. to make a long story short, I have proven in an article that's published that what these Jewish scholars from that community wrote to Maimonides 50 years later than Ibn Ezra is based on the teachings of Ibn Ezra of astrology in that community. This whole region, I told you that, Danny, one time in our conversation, the whole region in southern France was rife with mysticism, with different religion, different cults, Christian cults, and so on. It was in the air. No wonder astrology was also part of it. And when Ibn Ezra was there, that's exactly what they wanted. They were happy to get the knowledge of the knowledge of astrology. So I proved through my analysis that what they write to Maimonides is based on what they learned from Ibn Ezra. But that's not central to what I'm saying to you today. But I'm juxtaposing Ibn Ezra and Maimonides, and later on I'll come back to it. Because Maimonides was completely against astrology from the ground up, just chuck it away, while Ibn Ezra wrote the books and very detailed and a few more things that I'll show you later. So there's really a stark contrast, one that completely rejects astrology, one that embraces it completely, both Jewish rabbis. So now I want to, this is my little translation. I'm going to sample to you just a few of the questions that they sent him so that you see how detailed the questions were, how knowledgeable, so knowledgeable that I could use these questions in my teaching today to answer questions. They're so knowledge of the issue of astrology and the technicality of astrology. So I'm just going through some headlines. So headlines here. These are each block here is a question that they had. So is it all determined, or can the power of the mind overcome? Question. Or is the whole thing relative to the scope of the predictable events? Is the relativity there? Then they have some theological contradiction, which I mentioned already. They touch upon that as well. Then number 4, is death natural or deserved? That's a whole religious thing. Death is like a punishment to transgression. So is it natural or deserved? Deserved meaning as a punishment. Can you see it in the chart? That's what they ask him. Then they say they have a disturbing realization. They say other sciences like medicine are useful, while astrology brings frustration and anger. Frustration and anger because of all these contradictions. And they repeat this Talmudic phrase, Ein Mazal Israel, and they ask Maimonides, do you think it's right? Ein Mazal Israel? No Mazal. They ask it again. They know the Talmud. They know all these arguments from the Talmud as well. They know astrology, they know philosophy, and they know the Talmud. And it all shows up in these questions. And can you predict disaster? Number 7, can you predict disaster, meaning like mundane thought? Can you predict a disaster when it's going to come and where, the location? That's as far as they go. Can you predict? And is there remedy? Because if you know that it's coming, can you avoid it? They ask him. They expect him to answer the technical details. Okay. Is there a remedy? Then there's a question about relocation, which is wonderful. Number 12 here. About relocation, change of location. They say, can relocation help to escape from the evil decrees of the stars? That's a straight translation. Relocation. And if you do relocate, they continue. How far you should move? Can you imagine that? It's what we teach in class. How far do you move to change the chart and relocation? So they're aware of that. Ibn Ezra actually mentioned that in his writing. Okay. I'm going to skip this because it needs more explanation. And what do I have here? They even have a question on horary. They ask, you don't know if it's a technical question or a moral question or ethical question. They say, can you ask a horary question about someone else, not about yourself, like a third party? Can you, is it valid? Ask about someone else, especially if that someone else doesn't know that you're asking about them. It's ethical, it's moral, it's technical. They go to that level. I call it third party. So that's as far as I want to go in sampling this one. And now I need to move on. Okay. 1 second. Okay. I'm going to skip some here. And Ibn Ezra, I already mentioned him. He's on, I call it the other end of the spectrum. So I'm not going to do the details, but Ibn Ezra in his astrological writing, again, you have to find it in places. In the introduction to 2 books, the Beginning of Wisdom is one, and the other one is the Book of Nativities. In the introduction, also in the Book of Elections, he discusses a little bit the issue of fate. Can you escape it? And how far does it go? And he talked, and actually one of the solutions that those older generations came up with was the doctrine of the soul. I think it goes back to Neoplatonism. So the understanding of the human soul is that it has 3 parts. The lowest part is low and middle and high. The lowest part is the part that animates the body. It's what we share with animals, the life element, the animation, the anima. That's the first part of the soul. We share with the whole biological sphere. The middle part is the intellect, the mind, which is assumed only by humans. Only humans have the mind, the intellect. And the third part of the soul is completely intangible. It's something that we cannot even touch. It's a part of the soul that's supposed to go high, 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 all the way up to the throne of God, to reach the heavens. That part of the soul, that highest part, is supposedly above the stars, unaffected by the mazal. And the goal is to be so spiritual, to live in that part of your soul that you're completely detached from the physical world. So that's the escape, the cop-out. That if you can practice by learning and studying and learning, get to that level where you live in that part of the soul, you're above the stars. That's the theory of the soul. And it appears in Christian theories, it appears in many, many places where they try to resolve faith and astrology versus religion, the theory of the soul. So that part of the soul is supposedly the escape route, the escape hatch from the chart. So Ibn Ezra mentioned that, and he ties it together with learning. The more learning, the better. And he gives you like a prescription, learning first this and then this, the Torah, the Talmud. He said to you, learn astrology as well, in order to get to that highest spiritual level. That's his treating of faith. And he has to do it, because you cannot write, a Jewish person cannot write an astrology book and not discuss it a little bit. And he did. So it shows there. But there's something more interesting about that, and I'm going to do it, and I'm getting close to